like they'd have to make an international division, but that's been what they've been talking about for
I
years.
know
They want to do a Super Bowl overseas
I know the Bears somewhat recently played in
this
London,
year.
yeah.
Yeah.
But is that like a full on, like there's enough demand for it?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
every
surprisingly. Yeah,
year they play multiple games in London. There's games in Munich now. There's games in Mexico.
Brazil.
You
Okay.
know, the problem is what they would have to do is they'd have to make it, not to go too long-winded in this, they'd have to make it an international division because it would be criminally unfair for a London team to have to travel eight or nine games, to the States.
Yeah,
I think it'd be like the NBA. You'd have better luck putting a team in Toronto. You know what I mean? But then too, the problem is then you're screwed in free agency because nobody's gonna. It's like Green Bay. No player wants to go to Green Bay. You know what I mean? They have to offer money. Like in the NBA, nobody wants to go to Toronto. Doesn't get free agents. Nobody wants to go to Canada. Nobody wants to live up in Canada. You know, but at any rate, though, we're talking to Nora today, the Best Picture winner this year. Sean Baker's brand new film, well worth seeing. I'm kind of upset that we didn't review it before the Oscars, so we had a little bit more. I was the only one who had seen it before the Oscars, so I was the only one to talk about it, really. And even then, I saw it late because we didn't get it until January out here. But it has enjoyed a very nice theatrical run. It's one of the top grossing films for Neon too. It's definitely kind of been the slow burn movie of the year. It's still in the theaters. It came on Hulu on Monday on St. Patrick's Day, but it is in theaters still. I'm glad they've kind of loaned themselves, or Neon's adhered to Sean Baker's request of letting this movie breathe quite a bit in theaters because it was technically released, let me see, October. It was mid-October, and it's kind of been a slow burn expansion since then. But this is the new movie from Sean Baker. Sean Baker, a director that I absolutely love, was acquainted with him back in 2012. He made a movie called Starlet, and then he made a movie called Tangerine. His first big break, or when he really got mainstream recognition, was The Florida Project in 2016. His movies generally revolve around two different groups of people: sex workers or immigrants, and in this case, both. In this case, both. Nora is a lovely movie from top to bottom, though. It's about a stripper from New York who marries the son of a wealthy Russian oligarch. That's kind of redundant. I don't know any poor Russian oligarchs, but a Russian oligarch, no less, played by Mark Edelstein. You got to say that with a little flair on the name, though. And essentially, what happens is his dad, the kid's dad, gets wind that he married this stripper, and he sends his goons and also a one of his henchmen back to New York to annul the marriage. One of the henchmen is played by Yura Borisov. His name is Igor, who received a Best Supporting Actor nominee. Cannot wait to talk about his performance because there is a lot to say about his character that I absolutely loved. I reviewed this movie back in January, as I said. I think it's an incredible movie. It has a lot in common, I think, with the Safdie brothers movie Good Time. If you guys seen and remember that, reminds me a lot of that, and it's sort of like manic energy, and it's just real off the wall pacing, kind of screwball comedy, sneaks up on you with meaning. Another movie of that nature too is After Hours by Martin Scorsese in the 80s. So it reminded me a lot of that movie too. We'll switch gears though. I want to hear somebody else's voice. Joe, what you got to say about Honora?
Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Yeah. Going into this, it's
live and online. It's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
Better than ever. It is Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. We come to you live and in living color every Wednesday evening, 6:30 Central Time. Me, yours truly, Joe Viso and Dominic Guanzon here today. It's a jam-packed Looney Tunes show today. There is so much going on with this franchise, and we touched on it last year, the whole Coyote versus Acme debacle, which remains unsolved, but could be getting a big breaking news thing. Who knows? Maybe even by the end of the show. Who knows, really, right now? But man, has it been a loony start to the year for Warner Brothers, pun absolutely intended. We have three major things that are sort of engulfing this franchise right now that we're going to tackle on. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to tackle news first as kind of a precursor to the movie today. We've got Coyote versus Acme news. We've got Looney Tunes news in general, some potentially significant news that is as saddening as it is urgent for this series. And then we also got a movie to review, The Day the Earth Blew Up, the brand new Looney Tunes movie released in theaters last weekend by Catch Up Entertainment. Still sticking around. I know it's only in the second week, but still sticking around, kind of doing a small but mighty
I
run in theaters.
it seems like word of mouth is getting about that there's a Looney
Yes.
Tunes movie in theaters, and more people are like, oh, and they're actually going to check it out. Because my dad called me today. He's like, hey, I have the day off. He's like, what movies are there to see? Like, he's like, I already saw Novocaine, and I'm like, well, there's a Looney Tunes movie in theaters. He's like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, he's like, oh, no shit. All right. And then he just hung up the phone.
That's amazing. Your dad's cooler than my dad in that respect. Then I'll tell my dad. I'll be like, man, you got and you guys know my father, at least tangentially. I was telling him a couple weeks ago. I said, this was before the Oscars. I said, Anora's gonna win Best Picture. I said, and I think you'd like it. I said, I really unironically think you would enjoy Anora because he watches maybe 2 movies a year. So I told him, I said, I think you would like Anora. So then he said, I believe you. So then I'm like, I told Catherine, I was like, holy shit, I think he might actually watch Anora when it comes on like HBO or when it comes on like, one of the premium channels and stuff. So I said, you're actually going to watch it? And then he texted me back, I'm not going to see it, but I believe you.
Oh
And then
my
I'll
God.
and then I'll tell him, I'll be like, the new Looney Tunes movie in theaters is great. And he'll be like, there hasn't been a good movie since Charles Bronson. Anyway. Anyway, though. So we are reviewing The Day the Earth Blew Up. We'll get to that in just a few short minutes, but it is great to see these gentlemen. Joe is I don't want to say post recovery because that's not really accurate right now, but you are moving through the phase of post recovery right now.
I would say post recovery is still accurate, like, because it is still just really slow. I talk slower, I move slower, like it. So to give you all a quick update, I was pushing myself to feel like, hey, by next week I gotta be back up on top. I gotta be rolling with the punches and everything. And my body said, hold up, no, you're not. And then it just slowed me down, man. It like basically it put my body was like, Helmy, I don't think you realize this. You're almost 30. You're not the 20-year-old you used to be. You can't recover that quick now from an injury or something. You need rest. And I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, you're right. I am turning 30. So, yeah, my body has definitely taken more of a let's pump the brakes a bit and maybe utilize your doctor's note and actually recover stuff. So, it's been okay. It sucks. I haven't gone to the theater in almost 3 weeks now. This is probably the longest I haven't been to a theater.
Wow.
Since COVID.
That's since COVID. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I think so. Because with the show, at least I go once to review the movie we're watching. But then sometimes something else will come out that I'm like, oh, I have to go see. Like Marvel movie or something that we're not talking about really, or maybe a comedy, whatever it may be. This weekend, my dad wanted, as long as I'm good, maybe we'll go see it. But he wants to go see the new Jason Statham action movie. We're not gonna talk about that on here, but he wants to go see it because dad films, and so
It really is a
yeah,
dad film. That's a really great way to put it.
yeah, it
It's
really
fucking
is.
called Working Man.
Yeah, every dad sees themselves as that. um, so it was like, yeah, I mean, as long as I feel okay, as long as we go to a theater with recliners, maybe yeah, I'll go. Um, But to get to it, basically, I'm doing okay. I'm hoping by next week, which I won't be a part of that show because it's the first Wednesday of the month. But I'm hoping whatever we are reviewing, the second Wednesday show, I'll finally be back in a theater and I can actually participate in the show. Because unfortunately, and I was the one who wanted to review this too. I put it on the schedule and everything when it first got announced. I did not see the Looney Tunes movie, but other than that, I am doing okay.
Pro tip, my best friend Nick a couple of weeks ago, actually probably a couple months ago now, it's probably about a month and a half. He saw The Brutalist, which is of brutal length, 3.5 hours. So he went to one of those AMC's. He went to one of those AMC's that was recliners, and he's like, I knew it wasn't going to be full. It was like after work on a Wednesday. I said it was ballsy to see that movie after work. Um, but he went and he got one of those, those couple reclining chairs. You know how they're like in couplets.
Yeah.
And he's like, obviously, he's like, there's nobody next to me or whatever. So he said, I lifted up the armrest. And then he said, I lifted up the armrest of the other one. He's like, and then I rolled up my jacket as a pillow. So he took a picture of like the pillow rolled up and the AMC arm chairs with the armrest. And he goes, and he texts me, he goes, motherfucker, I invented the AMC bed. So there's a pro tip. That's pro tip. If you have a lightly attended screening of Working Man, I still just love the phrase AMC bed. So I had to figure out a way to drop that in. Dom, how are you?
I'm doing a lot better than Joe. I'll tell you that much. Uh, our hearts go out to you, my friend.
For
No,
real.
I've had family members who have been in similar situations, either post surgery, like you, or in terms of like injuries and things. The road to recovery is tough. And it really makes you think. I've thought about this too. Like back in the days when you're in high school and you're like, yeah, I could smash my face against a brick wall and I'll be, jumping around in 2 minutes just fine.
Yeah.
And time it works its magic. The human body is incredibly durable and also extremely fragile. It is that dichotomy never ceases to amaze me. It really doesn't. So I'm doing just fine. I'm using the last of my PTO. So it's a little hard following when someone says, "Yeah, I'm doing terrible," and then I'm like, "Yeah, I'm doing great." And you feel like a dick afterwards. But no, I'm all right.
Yeah, it's challenging for sure. I've already come to the consensus as somebody who's had a on again, off again back issues for the last maybe about 2 years or so. I've come to the consensus I'm going to be one of those old dudes that has a really swanky, really nice custom cane. It's going to have my name engraved on it. It's going to have maybe a wolf on the top of it and shit like that. I'm going to have like the swankiest cane that you can imagine. I'm going to look like Scary Movie 2 when they're going through the hallways with the pole. So there's Big Daddy Kane. That's old Master Kane. Oh man, at any rate, we got a lot to get to today, gentlemen. Starting with Coyote versus Acme. This was news that broke last week, a week from today, right before the show, and we could have talked about it then, but I thought two things. I thought let's hold off on it in case there's an amendment to this story or an amendment to this story or something else occurs with it. And number two, maybe more importantly too, I think it just fits germanely with the topic we're discussing today. Ultimately, the movie we're reviewing, The Day the Earth Blew Up. So we'll take till about 7 o'clock, I think, to dissect both these pieces of news. Coyote versus Acme, though. Famously, this movie was supposed to come out in 2023. It got taken off the schedule. It got taken off the release schedule for a little while. And then Warner Brothers shelved it in favor of a $30 million tax write-off instead. That news came out last year, was devastating for a lot of people, especially the creatives that worked on this movie and everything like that. The movie stars Will Forte. It's budgeted at about $70 million from what I've read. And it also, too, was just peculiar. It was shocking at the same time where it was like this like live action animated combo movie, and these movies tend to do really well in the summer. It's really more beneficial for Warner to take a tax write-off than to release this damn thing. Don't they have a streaming service that is kind of tailor-made for like in their opinion like second tier crap content? I'm not saying the movie's crap, but if that's how they viewed it, like then why not just release it on Max? So it was doubly peculiar too, and it goes back. The only sentiment I can really devise from it is that, like, ever since Warner Brothers and Discovery merged, it's been an absolute disaster, optically, creatively, and just in terms of really souring the public perception. And forget the public perception. Like, the general public doesn't pay a lot of attention to movie studios. Forget the public perception. It's the creative perception that's really hurt this thing tremendously. Because if you're a director, especially a director with clout, why on earth would you want to go work for Warner Brothers? Why would you want to go funnel of money or sign a first look deal with them when you have the chance of a movie that you did ending up like Batgirl or ending up like Scoob Holiday Haunt 2? Now, again, we're three gentlemen very, very critical of that new Scooby-Doo movie. But at the same time, too, if there's one type of movie I did not think would get shelved by a studio, it would be an animated movie, an animated sequel to one of the biggest successes of the pandemic.
Yeah.
That was also a holiday themed movie. And you could have released that during Christmas. You could have released that during late Halloween, early November. It wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference. That movie still would have done well. Batgirl was another situation, but still sad nonetheless. The Adil and Bilal film that never came to be. Well, the news then, it's been pretty quiet. The state of Coyote versus Acme, quite frankly, it was unknown up until a couple of weeks ago. There was no update given. We didn't know if the movie was deleted. We didn't know if it was actively being shopped. The last real report we got was that the Warner Brothers, and this is just one of the saddest goddamn things I've seen in the entertainment world in quite some time since movie theaters closed. They allowed the cast and crew and the directors and the directors and the writers and the animators to have what Warner Brothers called on their backlot a funeral screening of the movie for everybody that worked on it. That was the last update for Coyote versus Acme. And again, that sounds like the saddest shit in the world. Like I would have, at a time when you think about like movie premieres and everything being celebratory and gleeful, this thing being like, okay, this is the last time we're probably going to ever watch this movie that we all did that nobody's going to get to see. So this news came out. ComingSoon.net was the first place I saw it. Brandon Schurer wrote the story. Basically, Coyote versus Acme might have a buyer. So that confirms at least that the movie still exists. The movie, it was not deleted. It's still being quietly shopped. Reportedly, Warner Brothers rejected bids from Netflix, Amazon, and Paramount, all of whom apparently put in a bid. Warner Brothers wants $75 million for this movie. This movie that they're going to declare a $30 million tax write-off, they want $75 million for. Go figure.
Kind of showed your hand right there, didn't you?
Didn't it, right? Like and again, it drives more speculation. It's like, then why don't you release the damn thing? If you're going to value it that high, you're obviously thinking there's going to be some residuals and some success with this movie, some financial success. Why the hell don't you just release it? But Catch Up Entertainment is currently negotiating a deal. They want it in the $50 million range for this movie. Catch Up Entertainment, we're gonna reference them quite a bit later on in the show. They are the company behind The Day the Earth Blew Up. Catch Up Entertainment has distributed a handful of movies. They are behind, which quite frankly, I forgot even came out. I still thought until I was reading a couple weeks ago, I didn't know this thing came out. It's the latest Hellboy movie, The Crooked Man.
Yeah.
With Jack Casey as Hellboy. This thing's gotten not repulsive reviews. It's actually slightly better reviewed than the last Hellboy movie, the Neil Marshall one. But they're behind that one. They're behind Hypnotic, which came out back in 2023. That was that really shitty Robert Rodriguez, Ben Affleck movie that came out like 2 years ago. That was a dreadful movie. The Jessica Chastain movie, Memory. They did the Michael Shannon movie, or I take that back. It wasn't Michael Shannon. It was another movie called Wolfsmire.
Their most successful film just has to probably be Ferrari with
Ferrari.
With
Driver.
Oh my God. Adam Driver, thank you. Yeah, where it was like that was probably the only one I knew that was like in a lot of theaters, made it to the top 5 box office. It probably is what got him enough money to be like, hey, yeah, we could buy the Day the Earth Blew Up from Warner Bros.
Because that was my first question: was how the hell does the studio behind such winners as Hypnotic and Hellboy: The Crooked Man have the capital to purchase a movie of this? This would far and away be their biggest purchase and their biggest success, most likely.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to rag on Catch Up Entertainment because I admire what they're doing, but that Ferrari, we didn't review it on the show. That Ferrari movie was cinematic melatonin up until the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That you talk about Ford versus Ferrari. Ford versus Ferrari was like fucking Speed with Keanu Reeves compared to Hypnotic, or compared to Ferrari, excuse me.
Right.
But anyway, though, yeah, so this is a quote from Deadline. the pact isn't finalized and there's still a chance it doesn't make it, but it's heading in the right direction. Should it get over the line, the film would get a theatrical release in 2026. So this is where things stand with Coyote versus Acme. There really hasn't been any other updates in the last week other than the generated interest from Ketchup Entertainment, which is behind, like I said, the day the earth blew up. How did you react to this news though, Joe?
I mean, hopeful. It was nice to see that, yeah, this movie that, I mean, for what I can tell, a lot of people wanted to actually see come to fruition because, one, the Looney Tunes, I think, are just like an IP that people love. I mean, like, for God's sakes, like, as much as people crapped on that new Space Jam movie, I know a ton of people that watched it. Why? Because they had the Looney Tunes in it, and they were like, hey, I love the first Space Jam, or, you know, I grew up watching that one, but I love the Looney Tunes as well, so let me see that. So it was nice to see that, like, hey, like, there's a possibility that we actually get this movie, Coyote versus Acme, which, from the premise alone, and you know, in good fortune too, you have, like, you know, James Gunn writing this, as well as you know, solid other a solid, like, behind the scenes team in general, that people actually looked at this one as, oh, this actually might be like a Looney Tunes movie that's actually done pretty well compared to Back in Action and Space Jam's the Space Jam films. Um, and then it got scrapped and put away. But now it's like, hey, this could actually potentially come out. And it, you know, it took until, basically, and it sucks to say this, it took until we had movies like Coyote vs. Acme, Batgirl, and Scoob Holiday Haunt, which is like, hey man, look, in terms of those three movies, was I really excited for any of them? Maybe just the Coyote Acme one. That's about it. But at the end of the day, I do think it's BS that a cast, a crew, a bunch of other people worked on these things, and it just gets written off as a tax write-off. And nobody gets to see the effort that they did. They probably only get to use it in terms of, like, hey, like, you know, here's, like, you know, my application. Like, you know, I did the sound coordination for Batgirl. Well, what was it like? I can't show you because the film's been locked up in a vault for years and everything. So it's just like, you got to take my experience where you have it. It sucks. I mean, and you hear, like, other stories too, where it's like the Batgirl directors were at their sister's wedding when they found out that their movie got scrapped and stuff. So it's just like, yeah, it sucked that it took to that point to be like, hey man, look, no matter what, these people do deserve to have their movies released at some point, okay? If Tommy Wiseau can have The Room appear on the big screen, then goddamn it, so do these guys, okay? Everybody has a chance to, like, you know, all that hard work they put into whatever it is that they make gets shown off. So it's good to see that this has a chance to have that resurgence, and who knows, with Warner Bros. Selling off a lot of their properties and franchises, as well as just, like, solo projects. Like, they sold a Batman animated show to Amazon, and it turned out to be, like, one of the best Batman animated shows we've had since the original run with the like, you know, the infamous Batman voice actor. Can't think of his name right now, unfortunately.
Adam West?
No. Voice actor.
Voice
from
actor.
the 90s Batman. He passed away last year. Can't remember who it was though. So sorry about that.
Oh, like Batman the animated series?
Yes.
Oh my god, I'm blanking on it too. Yeah. Kevin Conroy.
Right?
Kevin Conroy.
Okay, Kevin Conroy. Thank you. I was like, Mark Hamill. Who the hell was the Batman? Yeah, like, you know, it's like you look at that and it's just like, maybe there's a chance too that Batgirl can be picked up by something. Scoob can be picked up by Netflix, maybe, whatever it may be. And that these films actually have their chance in the sun. The other thing, yeah, actually, you know what? I'll save that other thing for the next story because it more ties into that. And I've been talking long enough. Dom, what about you?
Look, you two are making all the hippy dippy artsy fartsy arguments. I'm here to represent good business, except for the fact that this still has not been a good business move throughout this entire process. You could even argue the whole Zaslav era has been just really sloppy business. It's incredible to you guys covered most of it. Really, it's incredible the give and take here between, or really just take and take of like the long term versus the short term, and all those, you know, those tax breaks, those tax write-offs, those quick profits now, and the lack of investment into a brand, the lack of investment into good staff, good talent. It's just not coming together. And we're seeing this across the industry. It just so happens that this is just the most egregious form of it. Between Batgirl, Batgirl movie, and this, it's astonishing that we are stooping to these new lows. They we don't really know this for sure, but you could make an argument. There maybe is an argument that back in the day of the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and the whatnot, that maybe studio execs had some shred of honor. Maybe you could even just say ego. Nowadays, I don't even know if the studio ghouls have that anymore. Right? It's like it feels like they're on edge to liquidate anything at a moment's notice, and then they can run away to whatever they're doing, to the next big thing. So it feels more craven now than ever, these moves. So I just have to ask, when does it reach a tipping point in terms of your brand? This is there's a very brazen part of me that just kind of wants to see it all burn down at one point, even though I know objectively that is not a good idea. Morally, that is not a good idea for a variety of reasons. But it can be exhausting. But we do have, thankfully, what do you call them? Hidden gems, right? Like with this movie that we are about to review later on, past the 7 o'clock hour, that we can get something out of this and maybe even stir up some more support. So we'll see. Yeah.
Joe, you also made a really good point too earlier about just should Coyote versus Acme see a release? Should it see a release and underperform in theaters? God forbid.
I think. I mean, even if that happens, it happened, man.
It's
Like,
got John Cena. Why wouldn't you want a theatrical?
But the more so the point that I remember you making, Joe, was that if this movie underperforms in theaters or outright bombs, I don't want to hear anybody.
Okay.
I don't want to hear anybody lecture.
Okay.
I don't want to get a fucking internet lecture from anybody about like film preservation and supporting the arts and supporting original ideas and stuff like that. It's another argument, but I think it's an important point you made.
Okay, yes. I made that in the green room, and as in the green room, I mean just our group chat like a few days ago. I mentioned that like all over Facebook, Twitter, whatever film groups I'm a part of, or just like, it pops up in my feed because I'm associated with that stuff, and like, it just For You pages, all that stuff. All I see is people being like, it's a shame we didn't get this movie because, everybody deserves, and that I have the same opinion. Everybody deserves to have the chance, and when you complete a project like that, it should be shown. It should be shown in some capacity. Like I said, Viso could have had his movie in the theaters for 2 weeks. So can you. I better not. Yeah, when this thing comes out and it bombs, and then like nobody went to go see it, I don't want to hear people like be like, "Wow, like thanks for going to the theater, guys, to support yada yada yada," or like well, people don't want to go to the theaters anymore. I don't understand why, and it's just like, but then like it's like the same person I'm seeing say that didn't go see Coyote versus Acme, didn't go see this like whatever it may be, low budget indie hit or something. They just go whenever like it's just convenient for them, and it's just like, hey man, look, if you're this passionate about preserving the art and everything, then yeah, you got to kind of make the time yourself. And yeah, it might not be a convenient time to go see a movie or whatever, but if you can make it to a matinee show, you can make it to whatever, a discount Tuesday, do what you got to do.
No, it's true, because I'm sick and tired of people, even nowadays too. Like, don't get me wrong, like there's some like political back and forth and stuff like that about the new Snow White movie that I'm not like thrilled to get into, nor do I want to get into.
Yeah.
But I ultimately don't think that was a huge role in the movie bombing. I think it's a small piece of the pie. But I'm bringing up the point that like, you know what, like Snow White bombs and like, outright bombs this weekend, the live action Snow White movie. And I'm like, good. I hate to say it, but I'm like, good. I was kind of hoping the same for The Little Mermaid last year, but that disappointed me. The Lion King 2 did fairly well, but not as well.
It picked up traction the longer it was out.
It stuck around. It did have legs.
Yeah.
But the thing was, with the Snow White movie not doing well, kind of performing more like Dumbo, I'm like, good. Like, this kind of creatively bankrupt shit. Like, I'm at the point now, even too, is like, even as a critic, I don't like those movies. I don't think there's anything to gain by redoing them in live action, so I
Yeah.
just don't see them. I won't see the Lilo and Stitch movie either. And it's going to make the argument moot anyway because that one's probably going to do really well. But
it is because, and we can go into it closer to that, but like I associate that, just a quick thing, the closer and like, you know, more recent these Disney live action remakes are, like, you know, if they're part of that Disney 90s Renaissance era, like animation era Renaissance that they had, or like maybe even the early 2000s, I feel like people will go see it. But when you do stuff like Dumbo and Snow White, which was like from the
40s.
very early on, yeah, very early on, and they were like almost just an hour long films, and that was it. Nobody really cares about those as much.
No, it's true, and the princess thing's kind of faded.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to. My point being, though, the reason I even bring it up is because I'm happy. It's weird. It's kind of weird and schadenfreudish to say, but I'm happy to see those movies flop because I think there's in some way there's people that are tired of the sort of the same regurgitated stories.
Yeah.
And people are always crying for like Hollywood to do more original shit, and then
then
Hollywood
they go
does
see
more
it.
original shit, and then nobody shows up, and
Yeah.
that's the constant frustrating part of it. Like Novocaine too. Novocaine didn't do super well, but it's like Novocaine is exactly the kind of movie that needs to succeed.
Yeah,
Like, you know,
I get tired of that. I get tired of that shit because it's like, it'd be like, oh, I want to see something, and then I'm like, oh, well, then go see Novocaine. I'm like, Novocaine's an original film. They're like, yeah, but you know, it's kind of like this and it's kind of like that, so it's not really original. It's like, no, it's an original film. Somebody wrote it. They came up with it on their own. It's not based on anything. Yes, it might be inspired from stuff, but it's still an original movie.
yeah, it's got a very similar aesthetic to Atomic Blonde.
Yeah,
Like,
or Nobody with Bob Odenkirk.
People don't seem to understand the concept of when you say original in the context of not being tethered to an IP or a
Yeah.
pre-existing property.
I got into this argument a lot when it came to The Creator, because like I said, like, it's not a good movie. I'm like, but it was cool to see like an original sci-fi film with a very unique world and like amazing CGI and everything. And somebody's like, bro, like, this is definitely just this. I'm like, no, but it's not. I'm like, you don't understand what original means.
You're not saying it's
people are
first of
just-
its kind.
People are just afraid to like things sometimes.
There's that
They
too.
just
Kinda
truly are, right? They're waiting for everyone else to jump on the bandwagon and label it original. You know, they're waiting for it to get its awards. Look, sometimes you like things that everyone else hates. That's okay. Defend what you like.
It's very fun. Take my word for it.
Defend what you like. Just make sure you have a defense for it, or admit that maybe you just don't. Right? And it's slowly we will all elevate ourselves. Believe me, it's okay. We're working on it. We work on it in this show, but like, yeah. All the wishy-washiness, and sometimes I fall into this trap all the time. I'm sure you could find some Sleepless reviews where every one of us does it to a degree, but except maybe Steve. But for me, it's sometimes you just gotta stand firm and just say, yes, I do like Zack Snyder. No, I'm kidding.
We will come back here. Went a little longer than I thought we would, but we'll touch on the Looney Tunes potentially being for sale from Warner Brothers too. We'll touch on that for a few minutes and then also lead into our review of the day the Earth blew up. There's much more Sleepless with Steve to come on this Wednesday night. Don't go anywhere. Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. Be back. And I love football, though. I find it incredibly fascinating. I find it simultaneously simple but complex. The business of football, though, is a very different beast. And it's something that when you start diving into, it really shows you what runs this country, what runs the academic programs of this country, whether it be the University of Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, LSU, the big collegiate powerhouses that we have in this country. Football not only runs these schools, but supplements every other sports program at major D1, Division I college athletics. Football is the bankroll. It's the reason you have a women's basketball team. It's the reason these colleges have lacrosse teams and tennis teams and badminton teams. It's the reason for it. Because football is a fucking cash cow in this country. And there probably hasn't been, and if there is, I don't want to make this a blanket statement because I haven't seen it. I've admittedly lacked on documentaries in recent time, but there might not be a better, there admittedly might not be a better documentary to show that fact than BS High, which is currently streaming on Max, directed by Martin Desmond Rowe and Trevon Free. I want to give these two dudes names. I want to give them name drops, and I want to name drop them a couple times because, man, these are some good directors. These are some good directors. I find documentaries to be, and I've been reviewing documentaries since I started reviewing movies back in 2009. I find documentaries the hardest types of movies to review because of the fact that it's like, am I interested? Do I love the story or do I love the movie? Or do I love the idea and the themes that the story brings on? Or do I love the approach? And it's something that I wrestle with constantly when I watch documentaries because I feel like it's tough. As somebody like me who has a lot of different vested interests, I can go from talking to you about ringtone rap of 2007 to Ren and Stimpy and its problematic creator in 2000 in the 1990s to country music of the 1950s, all of which topics on documentaries I've watched. I find documentaries the toughest to review because of the fact that I wrestle with the fact, am I interested in the story and the subject, or do I love the way it was approached? And I love both when it comes to BS High. I think this is a terrific documentary. Back and better than ever. It's Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. We'll come to you live and in living color every Wednesday evening, 6:30 Central Time. Happy to be with you today. We will take a couple minutes to discuss this because it's not official. It's reported. It's perception. We talked about Coyote versus Acme potentially being acquired by One Ketchup Entertainment, the company responsible for the day the Earth blew up. And right now, there's some rumors swirling. That's what they are now. They're rumors. They're not confirmed by Warner Brothers or anything like that. No, not confirmed from any industry or any other studio. That the entire Looney Tunes brand might be up for sale here very soon. And it would make a lot of sense. The one point I forgot to bring up during the Coyote versus Acme discussion is that reportedly that Coyote versus Acme, Warner Brothers ideally, perceptively would like to sell Coyote versus Acme by tax day, which is fast approaching in a couple of weeks, April 15th. And it could be setting the table for Warner Brothers to wash their hands of Looney Tunes altogether, which is just a really weird thing to say aloud. It's like Pepsi selling Pepsi. You know, it's like Disney selling the Mickey Mouse. It's so odd to even rationalize that the 95-year-old brand of Looney Tunes that made Warner Brothers what it was. Because way back before we were alive, way back before most of our parents were alive, really when our grandparents were alive and theater going started becoming a democratized form of entertainment in the country, it was Warner Brothers Looney Tunes shorts. Often,
honestly, great-grandparents.
Great-grandparents, really, yeah.
Yeah.
That played before movies. And right now it's reported that Warner could be selling off the entire Looney Tunes catalog here. And the writing is somewhat on the wall, given the fact that a couple of weeks ago, Looney Tunes is entirely gone from the Max library at the moment. Now, if you do want a Looney Tunes fix, mainly because I like to plug this whenever I possibly can, there is a wonderful network that launched on my birthday last year called MeTV Tunes. It's an over-the-air cable network. It's technically a digital sub-channel. So if you have antenna TV, you have channels like 23.2, 23.3, digital sub-channels. MeTV Tunes is under, obviously, the MeTV, the Weigel Broadcasting Entertainment channel. MeTV Tunes is a 24/7 cartoon network. It skews heavily pre-80s. A lot of Looney Tunes on that network, though. A lot of Looney Tunes, a lot of Bugs Bunny, a lot of Daffy Duck. Really great network. Highly recommend it. If you don't have an antenna, don't want to screw with that, I don't blame you. You can get it off of Friendly TV. You can get it for that. It's like $8.99 a month. One of the most used streaming services that I have personally. Want to throw that out there, unsolicited plug. But Looney Tunes, though, it's almost irrational to like think that Warner Brothers could clean house there. And I opine, just to be quick, I opine, quite frankly, that David Zaslav just does not like cartoons.
Yeah.
I truly believe that because they gutted Cartoon Network. They shut the Cartoon Network site down. They
removed almost every original animated program on Max itself.
Yeah, they canceled so many different, a lot of children's programming. They canceled that Elmo show,
Yep.
that late night Elmo Colbert style show. They canceled that. They've really tried to skew more towards adult programming since Warner Brothers and Discovery merged and since Zaslav's been in charge. They've really neglected or gutted the kid demographic for this too, and it's utterly irrational to think that Looney Tunes could disappear from Warner Brothers catalog. I don't know what there really is to gain from that, because I don't think it's a dying brand by any means. I don't think it's a dead brand by any means either. What say you, Joe?
I don't think it's a dying brand. I think it's a brand it's timeless. You know, you put these characters in front of anybody and they can be identified like that. It's just the fact of actually utilizing them for something good and actually doing something good with them. That's what makes the difference. That's what makes them have even more lasting power. Like, you know, oh, hey, I want to go and see. You look at this whole, and you guys will get into it, but you guys look at this whole, the day the Earth blew up. No marketing really went into it. You can't really...
No.
Can't really be mad about that. It's not Warner Brothers' fault. Ketchup Entertainment is probably a low budget studio. They probably didn't have enough money to really market this thing. But with good word of mouth, it's gaining some traction. It's gaining more and more not positivity, but just viewership at the theater. That originally it was supposed to leave the theater in a week, but now it's stuck around for its third week now, and it's like, okay, that's good to see at least. But then you look at something like Space Jam, and it's just like, what was that? That was to sell. That was to sell HBO Max. Like, we look at that, and it's like, that's all that thing was. It was a product more than an actual, like, movie. Then stuff like Coyote versus Acme, like, you know, again, actual movie, proudly is an actual movie. I'm just gonna assume. But now you're just like, you know what? The Looney Tunes haven't done anything for us. People aren't subscribing to Max to watch this. They're subscribing to Max to watch the mature shows. You know, House of Dragons, yada, 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 The Sopranos. And it's like, yeah, I watch that stuff. That's why I subscribe to Max. But it's kind of like why I do stick around with my Disney Plus subscription. It's like, yes, I'm subscribed to Disney Plus for some of their original base programming and this, like, the stuff that's on there. But every once in a while, I find myself going, shit, dude, I really want to watch Phineas and Ferb again. And it's just like, you know, I'm just like, and then I'll just pop on an episode. Like, I was recovering all of last week. You know what I watched last week when I was like, dude, like, I don't really want to watch anything too heavy like House of Dragons or Severance. Bro, let me throw on some Kim Possible real quick. Bro, let me throw on, like, yada, yada, yada. Like, you know, I throw on this stuff that, like, Disney built for my generation and everything. And every once in a while, I find myself going, damn, man, like, let me throw on this. Let me tell you something, too. If fucking Tom and Jerry was still on there, I would have watched a shit ton of Tom and Jerry on Max, as well as, like, the Looney Tunes animated things. It would have just been like a whole day of me just spending time watching those, like, classic animated shorts. So it sucks to see when something that, like, your company is known for, you're just willing to throw that out the window. You have so much memorabilia. You have a theme park tied to these characters, all this stuff, and you're just willing to get rid of it. And it's just like, why? Because it's not making you the money you want to see. What's going to happen then to the DC characters? If this Superman movie doesn't pan out the way Zaslav wants, is that it? Superman and all of them are going to be sold off too?
Fair point.
It's just a mess. Is that how WB's just going to be? If it's not making us money, we sell it off to make money from it then.
That's sort of the motto that you
Yeah.
can gauge from this whole thing, is that if it's not going to do anything for us in the present, then why are we going to keep it? And man, I'll tell you, Superman is such a risky bet. It really is. It's weird to say, but Superman in some ways is more of a risky bet than Looney Tunes, I would think too, because the last two Superman movies, not to go totally off base, but Superman Returns, starring Iowa native Brandon Ruth, just want to throw that out there. Superman Returns didn't do well at all. It was kind of more the case of it being over budgeted. And you know what they did then 7 years later? They released Man of Steel, and the same fucking problem happened, was that it went over budget. It was like $500 million when all was said and done. So
Superman has never been a stable, like, franchise in and of itself.
Hasn't. It
Yeah,
really
when they put
shockingly
Superman
hasn't.
back in the Justice League, it went over budget because of that.
Like he is an expensive asset.
The mustache alone.
You know, it's like people want a Superman movie. It's like, yeah, people like Superman and stuff like, I mean, I've always thought he's probably the most overrated comic character. That's just me. But at the same time, people like Superman, but it's like you set these movies up to fail because these movies balloon in budget. And they wind up like Man of Steel and Superman Returns. Both of those movies were like, see, the film critics are calling okay. You know, like it wasn't even like they were great. You know, like the public perception of especially Superman Returns wasn't great either. What say you, Don, before we segue into the day the Earth blew up and give Joe some relief?
That's just the thing with the Zaslav era, is that at least these execs back in the day, you could always tell off an exec, but at least those execs cared about WB, at least for their profits. It seems like this is like inside job. I don't know what it is going on. It's it's just decision after decision that just does not make sense. You saw what happened, how much potential revenue was lost when Marvel just pissed away Spider-Man, the X-Men, etc. back when it was trying to claw its way back into the game.
And look what they had to do to basically buy it back practically.
Yeah.
They had to build a whole like $billion franchise.
And look, and again, and Marvel got very, very lucky with in the way they reintroduced those characters. Extremely lucky.
Extremely, yeah.
You could probably thank Feige for that, amongst a myriad of other factors. But for this is just terrible decision making. I just can't make heads or tails of it. There really has to be only like three possible options. One is the unknown. We just genuinely cannot just find a reason. Two is that Space Jam: A New Legacy scared Zaslav so much with its failure that he just wrote it off in his brain, because he's such a he's so easy to just distract one way or the other. It's like, oh, it didn't make $100 million, then whatever the number he needed in his brain to think positively of it. Or three, maybe Eric Bauza, the new voice of Pokey Pig, banged Zaslav's wife. That's literally there just cannot be any discernible reason with all of these decisions. They are consistent in that they are really bad for Warner Brothers in the short term, honestly, but even worse in the long term. It is astounding. This is Michigan J Frog was the mascot of your brand for 11 years before it had to surrender to the CW, right? You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
There was a whole bumper on the WB when it would close its
oh geez, remember
brand.
Channel 9 in Chicago as WB.
Same. And then they aired that bumper. I didn't see it live. I had to watch it back on YouTube. But there was that bumper. It was Michigan J Frog. The stars were shining, the camera pointing upwards, and the silhouette of Michigan J Frog, taking off his hat, his frog hat, and doing a bow before revealing the CW. Right? There was a time where we gave a shit about these kinds of things, but and for us nerds, at least we cared about that. In addition to the studios themselves, now it seems like you got none of that at all. And this is like a fire sale. This truly feels like corporate sabotage. And this errant chasing of whatever kind of short-term profits is just disastrous. And I hope that's the takeaway when this whole era is done and over with.
That was extremely well said. That was a great rant right there.
Facts.
Thank you.
Facts too. Before we segue into the day the Earth blew up, 19 years it's been since the WB rebranded as the CW. 19 years. September 2006. I remember that because it took forever to get used to. Like, because watching WB, it was like the kids' network on Saturday mornings too. They usually had the best cartoons and everything like that. The little logo.
I saw the Mummy animated version. I saw Jackie Chan Adventures on the
I remember
WB.
That. Yeah, I remember Jackie Chan Adventures on WB too. Yeah, man, that was a good network back in the day. Then it was like CW, and then it was like Gossip Girl all the time. Won't get into that. But anyway, moving forward though. Great bits of news, though. Haven't had a news debate here on the show in a little bit, but at least, even though we're not going to take a ton of time, this is the kind of movie that I don't think could have filled an hour to begin with, but I do think that it still merits discussion. It was a movie I was really looking forward to seeing, too, and looking forward to discussion. It is the day the Earth blew up, a Looney Tunes movie. It's now in theaters right now. I got to get this right because there's like a million qualifiers. It is the first, follow me, the first fully animated and theatrically released film in the franchise based on entirely original material. Now, if you think back, you had Space Jam in the sequel, you had Back in Action. These were movies that blended the worlds of live action and animation, okay? In the 80s and the 70s, I think, you had animated Looney Tunes movies, but they were shorts. They were compilation films, like Bugs
With the
Bunny
occasional
Superstar.
original like thing in between the shorts.
They were anthologies.
They were like clip
Is
show. They were honestly like clip shows.
pretty much. It was like 70 minutes. Bugs Bunny Superstar was a big one back in the day.
The
But
Looney Bugs Bunny movie.
this is a start to finish complete narrative feature. And it stars Porky Pig and Donald Duck. Both are voiced by Donald Duck, Daffy Duck, excuse me. Both voiced by Eric Bauza, the Canadian actor. Great voice. Candy Milo also voices Petunia Pig in the movie too. This is a real fun one. This is a real joy to experience on the big screen too. Because I really, watching this movie, just couldn't help but smile at the fact that the Looney Tunes, and it, like, contrary to everything that's like swirling around them right now, but they have impressively been able to weave themselves through the times. Ironically, they're sort of like whiz bang, speedy pacing, kind of like ribald assault on your senses. Really fits in, I think, with the modern day animated landscape of movies that definitely caters to like dwindling attention spans, for lack of a better term. And I think that this movie really does a great job at being fast paced and a little manic, but also still very fun. And it also helps too that this movie has just a really great, contagiously infectious style. As you can judge by the title, this movie's heavily inspired by like 50s sci-fi B movies, that kind of thing. The plot is very much intertwined with that. You try to explain the plot, it's going to make your head explode like Daffy Duck in this movie too. It chewing gum and the gum turns people into zombies and garlic gets them to finally spit it out. I was like a fucking madman trying to explain this movie in my review. But man, I had a lot of fun with this thing, and that's what this thing is made for. What say you, Dom?
This is the movie that if you talk anything online on Reddit about appreciating film, about appreciating cinema, about appreciating animation, about appreciating voice actors, not those celebrity, not Chris Pratt in every animated movie. If you've talked any bullshit on Twitter, on Blue Sky, on Reddit, on YouTube, on whatever, this is the movie you need to get your ass off of and support. All right. And like Joe gets the one exception because he had surgery, right? And he tried his broken ass, his stitched up ass. I don't know where he got the surgery, but like he gets the excuse. Everyone else gets no excuse. If you tweeted out in 2007 about how the Looney Tunes aren't good anymore and they need to support good animation, you need to get your ass off and watch this movie. This is the movie. And I'll tell you what, it's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. It's not perfect by any means, but I had a big grin on my face. This is for a 31-year-old right guy who's jaded by politics in the world. This was very much a fun tongue-in-cheek movie with the occasional, not wink and a nod, but more so advanced joke that, and my theater, I think I was the perfect middle ground between the advanced and very young ages, which was the grandparents taking their toddlers, or not toddlers, but their 12-year-olds, to see this film. I was the only one who was remotely around the age of 30. Not even 20s and 40s. I think I was like that good 30-year time span in between for that theater, and sparsely populated, unfortunately. This is truly the movie to go out and see. And it's so funny because, like, dude, like Looney Tunes has been around for the past several years doing stuff. If you look on Wikipedia and you go to the bottom of any Looney Tunes page where you see the big compilation of topics,
The
right? You get
template.
past studios, characters, shorts, etc. Feature film television series. Did you
The
know
Wik-
that there's the reboot of or at least remake or continuation of Tiny Toons Adventures from the 90s?
I did know that only because of the fact that when I interviewed two of the guys behind Animaniacs, I was doing research and it led me to find that. I
Okay,
remember
you're a
that.
dork, but for most people, no. Honestly, we're both dorks. I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that until looking, doing a little tiny bit of research for this review, and it's like,
Well, these shows also get revived at such a heavy clip too. It's easy to miss, especially if you're not the
yes,
target demo too. And not to
yes.
mention too, sidebar here, real quick.
Mhm.
It's funny to me though. It's like, back in the day, when we were growing up, we had Nickelodeon, we had Cartoon Network, you know what I mean? Those were kind of the two hubs, Disney Channel as well. And then you had the basic cable networks and stuff. So if a show was premiering, there was a good chance that you knew about it and it was a conversational topic amongst the lunchroom table. Nowadays, with so many divergent entertainment options and streaming services and stuff, there's no like collective consciousness. There's no more water
Right.
cooler discussion about what Jay Leno did last night. You know what I mean? There's no more of that. So like it's funny to me to think that like how are kids, because it's the adults that are probably finding it. How are the kids finding stuff like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're
Like,
not. It's like 30 and 40-year-olds like us, desperately clinging to an art form.
like the average age for that show, that Tiny Toons revival, I can't imagine it's got to start with a 2, I would think. The average age.
I have not seen a second of this show. I literally only saw the Wikipedia page for it, so my apologies. But really, it's like the original Tiny Toons was already kind of an advanced show. Not and I don't like that term that I just used, but you know what I mean. Where there's always, like with Pixar movies, it appeals to the younger folks, and then there's always a wink and a nod for the older folks. Tiny Toons was doing like cultural like references for like fans of Steven Spielberg's works. Like
Yeah.
I can't think of anything right now, but like it is like you have to be not in the industry because I wasn't or anything like that, but you have to like kind of be in the know about this stuff. So I just don't know. And look, and the last thing we'll say about anything to do with the economics of this film and anything business related to that, at least I think, is that the Looney Tunes brand, admittedly, is kind of has been a messy, middling franchise, but there's so much potential for it. It is the heart and soul that made you what it was. This sounds more like a closing thought. I'm sorry, but really, for the day the Earth blew up, and we'll get to the movie proper here. I think is that it's a very enjoyable movie that if you even grew up with any hint of Saturday morning, like Looney Tunes are the face of Saturday morning cartoons. Just like that is one of the things you think of. It's either like a 1980s thing, like Ninja Turtles, GI Joe, or something like that, or it's the freaking Looney Tunes. I don't even think Disney has that Saturday morning, because yeah, I think it goes in that order. If you're thinking Saturday morning cartoons, it's either something 80s, 90s, or it's Looney Tunes. Yeah,
If you think of if you say animated movies, that's where they own.
correct,
That's where
exactly.
they own.
Yes,
But
yes,
if
yes,
you're
yes.
talking Saturday morning cartoons or nostalgic cartoons, the
Hmm.
Looney Tunes are one of the heads on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
For absolutely. To kind of pivot back to the movie itself, though, the one thing that I liked about this movie, and it seems like a stark contrast between the two, because the one movie I'm going to bring up, and I know I've referenced it on the show in passing in before, it's somehow fucking 14 years old already, but this movie's a little bit more whimsical. It's quieter. It's slower. It's only like 70 minutes long, too. And then this movie, while it's like 86 minutes long, it's also rapid fire. It's Looney Tunes. You know what I mean? But I don't think we get enough of these, because I don't think every animated movie fits this bill. But I call these movies similar to the 2011 Winnie the Pooh movie, the movie that came out the same weekend as Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Similar to the Winnie
Yeah.
the Pooh movie back in 2011. The day the Earth blew up is kind of like an adequate introduction to movie going for young kids. And I don't think we get a lot of those movies. We really don't. I don't think every animated movie qualifies as that. I think now oftentimes, like, I think the first movie, it's funny, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm like 90% sure Toy Story 2 was the first movie my parents took me to. I'm about 90% sure on that. Because by that point I was like 3, 2.5, 3 years old. But at the same time, though, I feel like this is the kind of movie that is a great way to introduce kids to movie going because it's not very long. It's extremely colorful. It's very fluid. It moves constantly. And the other thing with this movie too is, yeah, like, I make fun of the plot for being like stupidly, not even complicated, but just stupidly manic. But it also, at the same time, if you're taking a 3 or a 4-year-old, it's entertaining enough and goofy enough and wacky enough that it will keep them entertained and not asking you what's going on every 5 minutes because the logic of the world doesn't apply. And I like when movies like this are kind of that like soft launch pad for kids into movie going. At least I hope they are. I know that might sound a little idealistic, but
Yeah, for 91 minutes, this is good bang for your buck. And this is hardly a reinvention of the Looney Tunes franchise,
No.
but this is without a doubt returning to its roots with the added necessary updates to its humor, its formula, etc. Because you have to think about where the Looney Tunes came from. And I guess I'm kind of speaking to those who may think, oh, this doesn't feel as Looney Tunes as I thought it would, or something like that. I disagree with that because I just think you haven't thought about the Looney Tunes overall.
And I
It
also
is
think you're used to
yes,
bite-sized Looney Tunes.
exactly.
Where
Which
this is a narrative feature, the first of its kind.
yeah, the original Looney Tunes, the Schleichinger era, how they had to come out was because film cost a lot of money and they had to be literal shorts. Like they were forced to be literal shorts.
It was the
And
same as the Three Stooges too.
yes, exactly. And honestly, even in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, as we were saying, there's a reason why they were clip shows and they weren't full-fledged animated productions.
Right.
Space Jam is the closest we've had to that, and that was very unique in and of that came from a freaking what Hanes ad, Nike ad, I forget, but that was the origin of that. That was lightning in a bottle. Not particularly good lightning because I still don't think Space Jam is a good movie, but for the day the Earth blew up, this is the true successor to what the Looney Tunes, how the Looney Tunes exists in everyone's heart and mind, how it exists in the zeitgeist, in the cultural soul of America. This is the film that you have been waiting for. And I am happy to report, as I've been saying, that this is a pretty fun movie, and it really does return to its roots with the heart of it being Porky and Daffy being just
It's a buddy movie.
It's a buddy movie. It goes back to that old what's it called? Those two roommates thing. Oh, Jesus Christ. The Odd Couple of thing. Odd Couple kind of situation, which Porky and Daffy existed before the Odd Couple. Let me say that first and foremost. They really did. Like I'm talking we're talking like Betty Boop era. That's how these two were introduced. You just didn't have any narrative backstory or fleshing it out. You just kind of open up the old 40s, 30s, the old 1930s shorts with just these two doing a task and a job. That's it. Here we get some pretty fun backstory and all of these modern, methods of storytelling and all the modern intricacies and all the learning that the animation industry has done in the past 20 years alone, 25 years, in a post Simpsons, a post Family Guy, a post all of that, post Flash cartoons on Newgrounds, right? I'm giving the animators so much credit here, and the director and writer here, because they're all into go on Wikipedia and look at this voice cast. If you're not a nerd like us, you don't know any of these effing names. You truly don't. And there's kind of a beauty in that,
It's true.
I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Obviously you should and appreciate every single one of these names. I know I haven't, but
But it's not getting you to the theater based on name recognition either.
Exactly.
If you dig into these people, you'll realize the wealth of experience they have. Pete Brownguard, he's probably most contemporarily famous for Uncle Grandpa. That was a more recent
that's
show that he
him?
did. Yeah, he was an
There you
animator on
go.
that. And also, I have to plug this whenever I can. Shorty's Watching Shorties from Comedy Central. He was an animator on that too. I'll also, not to cut you off, but I'll also
yeah.
add too, is that going back when I was saying how like this movie's manic, it's got a lot of kinetic energy, a lot of built up energy to it. I don't know. There's something about hand drawn animation that when it gets chaotic, it still feels digestible. And I can't always feel that way with CGI animation. I think
It's a
that's
human hand making it every step of the way. Yeah.
and I think it's probably an age thing too. But I don't know, like hand drawn animation, when they get in a fight and then it just turns into like a scribbled bubble of nothing. You know what I mean? Like it's or like when a firecracker like explodes Daffy's head and then 2 beats later it's back to normal. Like I don't know. It's just it's got to be the era I grew up in and stuff like that in the animation I grew up watching, like Ed, and Eddie, that kind of style.
Oh, yeah.
But like hand drawn animation, it just feels like when shit starts really hitting the fan, it just feels more digestible and cleaner and easier to process. Sometimes there doesn't feel like all this stuff going on, even when there's a lot of stuff going on.
And all the deviations from the mainline animation for the majority of the movie is just absolutely beautiful. Dude, Farmer Jim
I was
is
just gonna
such,
say,
oh my God,
what a
an
beautiful
incredible
character.
gag. What a great character
Looks
for
like
a
a
gag.
classically painted, like Paul Bunyan-esque style, like just the way they incorporate him. He
Looks
looks
like
so
freaking Water Lilies by what's his name? Claude Monet. But mix between him and freaking Norman Rockwell, just perfection.
there's so much detail on him too. He's just a fascinating, like, because he looks so different
Yeah.
purposefully. He just is so out of place. It was like they were like drawing the animation cells, and they're like, are we done yet? And it's like the one guy in the corner is like, no, I haven't finished painting Farmer Jim's hat. You know what I mean? That's what it felt like. I'm just like, man, this is weirdly beautiful.
And how they play with that, which is like, yeah, he's so well animated. We don't have the time or money, seemingly don't have the time or money to animate him walking. It's
He
literally
floats.
just him moving like a stilt. It's so funny.
He floats. Yeah, he's beautiful. His voice too. The voice was provided too by Fred Tatasciore, and he's excellent too. He embodies it perfectly. I loved Farmer Jim in this thing. I thought he was just perfect. Like probably maybe the most memorable detail of this thing was
Except
just
for and then like the one shot, dude, where he turns around and it's like, this looks like the most expensive frames of the whole film, where he turns around and then turns back. It's so funny.
My one other point, probably not too relevant. We're butting up against the end here, the end of the time here. I don't want to no need to take a second intermission. I will say, like, we talked about this a little during Robot Dreams, and I'll parlay this into closing thoughts. Not a really earth-shattering observation, but Robot Dreams. I talked about this when we reviewed that. I said, I love how they made a song as overplayed as September by Earth, Wind, and Fire feel fresh, which is such a difficult thing to do. This song, I don't, it's overplayed on radio maybe a little bit. It's not really, I haven't seen it in movies. I can't remember the last movie I saw it in.
End of the world.
But man, REM's It's the End of the World as We Know It, and they let it play. They let it play for a montage, and it just felt so great and so different and unexpected. As soon as I hear that opening riff, I'm like, they're really going to do it. And it's like, yep, I still remember about 75% of the words of this damn thing.
And that's one of those modernisms that the film just had to do. I mean, it didn't necessarily have to do it, but the fact that it did it, and in my opinion, pulled it off just fine, is that, again, if you are a hardcore purist for Looney Tunes and animation, which I can kind of respect, that might seem out of place. It's just one of those things that I think it just had to do, and I think it did it quite effectively.
It's not a dance. Porky Pig and Daffy Duck don't stop for 2 minutes and dance to Doja Cat. You know what I mean? Like, get over it.
Daffy Duck did do like 5 seconds of doing a TikTok dance, but then he got canceled, and that was funny.
Yes, that was It wasn't like, oh, the Migos wrote a song for this movie. Right. You know what I mean? Like the Addams Family ends with a Migos remix of the Addams Family theme song.
I'm good.
You know what I mean? like there's shit like that feels so corporatized.
Yeah.
And everything. And then this, and even a thing like REM in this movie feels pure and feels just germane to it. And I love it. I want to give ample time for closing thoughts, or at least to get Joe back on the screen here. But for me, this is an easy 3 stars. This was a fun time at the movies. It's not record breaking. It's not earth shattering. It's not going to be a movie, I think, that is going to really radically revise the course of Looney Tunes or anything. But nor was it ever intended to be that. It kind of it's interesting that it comes out at this time when all this stuff around the franchise is swirling. But I think it just reminds you too, for those that see it, especially on the big screen, the endearing and everlasting appeal of the Looney Tunes. And for me, it's 3 out of 4 stars.
Yeah, this is for me. This is 3.5 out of 4 stars as well. My criticisms are like, okay, maybe the plot was a little too contrived at certain parts, and I acknowledge this is a Looney Tunes movie, but still at some times there's that. But for the most part, my heart was just gleaming with joy. So yeah, easy 3.5 out of 4 stars for me. Please go watch this movie if you can. My theater only had 2 showings, so get on this train now. Joe. Yeah.
Joe, you got to check out The Day the Earth Blew Up. That's what we're saying. There's a lot. It's a lot of fun. When you feel better, man, you got to check it out.
It's on the top of my priority list. Like if
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
If I can go to the theater like this weekend or something, I want to go see it. Like even if it's like if I can just lay like if I can get the AMC bed, I'll go see that fucking thing, dude.
The AMC bed will live on. I love it. I got to tell my buddy about that. Next week, I don't know if you guys saw the schedule. I made a few amendments. We didn't have any. We had hard truths tentatively, but we can table that. Next week, we're going to discuss, unless there's any objection, I was going to say Death of a Unicorn.
I won't be here, but you guys have fun.
Okay.
That's right. You're out, Joe.
Yeah.
Dom and I will discuss Death of a Unicorn. It is the new movie with Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega. It's a comedy horror film from A24.
Oh, God.
I saw the trailer, half of the trailer once. I don't know a lot about it. I think it looks completely weird. It's basically about a father and daughter who accidentally hit and kill a unicorn, and then the unicorn comes after them. Or the unicorn's parents comes after them.
Okay.
I think it looks delightfully absurd. I can't wait to watch it. I can't wait to hear it. And it's and the other thing that's good, that's really interesting too, it's very divisive. It's a very divisive movie.
I heard about that too, yeah.
Yeah, it's very divisive. So I'm excited to review this movie. I'm excited to discuss it with you, Dom. Joe, I appreciate you fighting through it, hosting the show tonight. I greatly appreciate your service, man. As always, it's a true pleasure to talk movies with you guys every single week. Next week is Death of a Unicorn, and who knows, maybe Coyote versus Acme. They'll sign on the dotted line. And I think Coyote is catch-up entertainment in this equation. We shall see. So I appreciate you, gentlemen. As always, we'll be back next week, same time, same place. For Joe Viso, Dominic Guanzon, and yours truly, this has been Sleepless with Steve.